Start. Ready? We are. Order, order. Good afternoon. Welcome to this session of the Justice Committee. We're continuing our inquiry into the probate service. Welcome to our three witnesses. Come to you very shortly. We just have to deal with our declarations of interest. I'm a non-practising barrister and former consultant to a law firm.
I'm a barrister with a current practising certificate on undertaking any direct court work. I'm the former Solicitor General, former chair of CAFCAS, former chair of the National Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel. My brother is chair of the Prison Reform Trust, and I'm currently providing informal advice to ministers on family justice policy.
I think there's anything else from anybody? Okay. Well, welcome to our three witnesses. Thank you for coming to help us today. Perhaps if we can start with each of you introducing yourself and your organisation. Angela, should we start in the middle?
Yes, thank you. Chair, I'm Angela Morrison. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Cancer Research UK. As way of completeness, I am also a non-executive board member of the HML Land Registry.
Yes.
So just for the record.
Yes, thank you.
I'm Alex McDowell. My day job is Director of Fundraising at the Duke of Edinburgh, but I'm here today to represent Remember Charity, which is a consortium of around 200 UK charities.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dave Hawes, Director of Finance and Infrastructure at Devon Air Ambulance, also Director of the Institute of Legacy Management, but here in my capacity today as Devon Air Ambulance.
There's a range of sizes of charity. Hopefully that we've got covered with your expertise, which is what we're hoping to find out. I just wonder perhaps who wants to start on this. For those who haven't seen the background briefing that we have and have read, just how important are charitable gifts in wills to charities in the UK? Who wants to start?
If I may, I put myself forward to speak first because we represent around 200, so you'll hear from my colleagues who can give first-hand testimony about the impact on our own individual organisations. But on behalf of the consortium, it's hugely important. I don't think it's easy to underestimate how important gifts in wills and philanthropy is to our sector. But before we go into that, it's also really important to say that behind every single gift we receive is someone's will and someone's intent to do good in the world. And as a charity, our job is to be the vehicle for their good will to go on. So we don't want to lose sight of this and all of this. It's right. We understand it from a charity point of view, but we're the stewards of their money as well. In terms of the impact, 10,600 charities in the UK benefited from a gift in the will last year. It's around £4 billion worth of income every year. And for the top 1,000 UK charities in terms of overall income, it's around 30% of voluntary income. And obviously that being an average, for many cases, it's actually the majority of their income. So you can imagine the impact of fluctuations in this income stream can have on planning, on delivery of services, and understand overall well-being of those organisations and the good they do in society.
Dave, as a smaller charity regionally, what percentage of bequests in wills, for example, for you, for the air ambulance?
Yeah, it can be up to sort of 50-60%, so
right.
it's a huge part for us, and I think that percentage has probably increased in recent years as well. The general environment of increasing costs, increasing pressure on income sources, as well as a greater demand for our service as well. So those things have combined to, I think, change it significantly in recent years. So it's always been significant, but while historically it's been something that's been relatively good to have there to build on capital projects, it's still a key part of that, but actually to just fund our daily operations, it's become an increasingly crucial part as well.
So your revenue costs are actually coming out of that. And Angela, what's your experience?
So it's, for us as a charity, it's huge. It's about 40% of our overall income and about 50% of our fundraising. So it's a massive contribution. If we think that we commit money for a minimum of 5 years when we give a grant, so every time we give our grants out, we do it for 5 years, we need to have assurance that that income is coming in over that period of time. And so therefore we are very, very acute to having that investment, that money coming in on a regular basis and being able to predict it.
Okay, we're going to come on to some of the consequences. Now, I think quite often charities are sometimes named as co-executors in wills, some of the larger charities. Is that a common thing? Not in New York, it's a minority of cases. Okay, so probably that's not something that we need to worry about too much then for the purposes of our inquiry, so we can eliminate that. James.
Can I make my declaration?
Of course, absolutely. Mr. Daly has
for
arrived,
me for
and
being late.
very, very, very proper too, James.
Can I apologise to the witness for being late? Please forgive me. I am a practising solicitor. I'm a partner in a firm of solicitors, and I think it is appropriate to say that I've taken guidance on whether I can contribute to this discussion here today. And is there anything else I need to say?
No, I think you put it on the record that you've got. Yeah, that's very helpful, James. Thank you. And as you said, Alex, part of the executive's role is carrying out the wishes of the deceased person of the will. And to what extent, as far as you're concerned, the probate registry, which is necessary, is there to do the transactional side in a sense. I don't suppose they're really giving effect to the wishes of the executor, or
it's
are they a necessary step in it?
Absolutely crucial step for several reasons.
Yeah.
First of all, it safeguards the wishes and prevents fraud.
Yes.
Secondly, in terms of cash flow, obviously you can't start distributing as an estate until probate has been granted. Yes. But obviously, even after probate has been granted, it will typically be between 6 months, 18 months for the estate to be fully distributed. So that ability to be able to predict, as Angela said, to be able to forecast ahead, that degree of certainty meets our Charity Commission requirements for accrual of income and for planning. So the probate service, apart from the fraud prevention for charities, is absolutely essential, and a well-run service is really important to us.
And how would you characterise? Sorry, David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think it's not only is it the biggest single control, which makes it absolutely crucial and fundamental, but it's also a level of assurance. Every legacy will be different. Different individuals involved, different solicitors involved. There's so many variables and different possibilities, but the point of grant and probate is the one point which gives clarification and certainty. So particularly in the charity sector, when you're asking trustees who won't be involved in the day-to-day, who come into charity periodically, to understand the information they're being given to them, that measure of probate to how certain the receipt is, and the valuation of that receipt as well, is absolutely crucial in the figures they need to understand to be able to make strategic decisions. So that level of assurance, which you also translate into auditors' assurance as well, so for annual reports, things like that, when they're coming in to review figures, it's the one standard which they're comfortable with, they understand, and they can apply. So it's absolutely crucial in so many senses.
Yeah, especially with the big complicated cases where it's just really...
And do you get many of those in your instance, Angela?
Yeah.
What are the sort of complications?
Just all the different types. They're becoming more international. They've got properties in them, all the different investments. So they're just becoming much more complicated with shares and things. So having that probate service that provides that clarity is just so important for us.
Actually, you refer to the importance of a well-run probate service.
Yes.
Have we got that at the moment?
We've certainly seen some... We have a really constructive relationship with HMCTS, and it's worth pointing out that they've been very proactive and supportive at understanding of the charity sector's needs, particularly over the last couple of years. However, we wouldn't be having this inquiry if we weren't asked a question about the impact of delays, and it has had a direct impact on us, both the time for an individual will to gain a grant of probate, but also the overall backlog and number of estates, it has had an impact. So I think we have all the ingredients of a good service, but we want to see that maintained and understand the need for sustained and an evolution of a service which we are seen as and are invested parties.
Okay, does anybody...
Yeah, I think we absolutely appreciate all that they do, and they are fantastic for us, and it is a great service. It's the unpredictability of the service and the future forecast of the service that gives us the uncertainty that causes us to make decisions internally that we don't want to have to make.
Okay, we'll come on to those in a minute. David, any
I think just to really stress that, it's that to be able to forecast, you need consistency, and that consistency obviously hasn't been there.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just drill down a little bit more into the impact that these delays on probate are having on both the charitable sector overall and maybe particularly with your individual charities that you have roles and responsibilities for? And we heard earlier that the income from wills is about 4 billion per year, but there's also, from evidence that you submitted to the committee, suggestion that quite stark figures that around about 800 to 900 million pounds across the charity sector as a whole is being tied up in probate. And specifically, Cancer Research UK gave a figure just for themselves of 34 million. So first of all, how did you estimate those figures?
Do you want to go first on the big numbers? And
Yeah. well, the bigger numbers are extrapolated from long-term trends, average gift values when received, and the number of estates we believe to be currently awaiting a grant of probate. So we've extrapolated. But a really key point here, and one of the things we're going to be we've put forward in our submission as a request, is to have greater visibility and transparency earlier upstream in the process, perhaps with a charitable indicator, so we can actually more accurately identify what that figure is. So to be fair, we feel it's a robust figure, but it is also an extrapolation. There isn't 100% certainty around it, but it is based on long-term trends, proportion of gifts which currently at probate are included gift, which is around 14%, and average gift values.
And for Cancer Research UK?
And we're basically a microcosm of that. So we forecast based on history. Since about 2019, the history has not been as consistent because there's been ups and downs with the HMT service. So we are more conservative over our forecast because of that uncertainty. But we've taken that macro number and based on our history then said we estimate that it's about 34. We now think it's about 30 as of January. We then have had a good month in February where we've had a bumper February in terms of legacy, so we probably will do a reevaluation and it might have come down again. We literally run it week by week almost in terms of what we receive and then how we review those numbers.
It seems from the figures that since 2017 the delays have been increasing. Then we had to factor in COVID and some of the unusual factors that then produced into the probate system. But you've now had maybe 6-7 years of these delays increasing. So to really understand the impact that it's having on the charitable gifts not finding their way to you either predictably or in a sort of timely manner, what are the most significant impacts that has had for the overall charitable sector? And again, you may want to talk specifically to your own charity.
I'm happy to pick up from an own charity perspective because it has had a huge impact, and that irregularities, like you say, there have been issues in that period, but at times the perceived backlog has gone down and gone back up. So trying to get an idea has been really difficult to build into forecasts, and all our decision making is going to be based around those forecasts effectively. And I think that it's effectively that knock-on impact of cash as well. So we've got, last week I went in to see our investment manager, and we discussed essentially, we had flagged that we potentially want to realise a part of our investments to invest in a significant capital project. And the chat we had last week, I had to say that, look, with our cash flow, with our legacy debtor, which is normally around 2 to 2.5 million, the money we're due to receive through legacy, which have gone through probate, that's increased to around about 4 million. Which is due to, I think, some of the figures which now have come through probate at the end of the last year as the figures started to clear, but obviously the cash is yet to flow through to us. So that receivable, that 1.5 million, that's effectively what we'd normally expect to have in cash, but we haven't got that. So the money we're expecting to draw down to invest into capital project, we're going to have to use for our short-term financing, with the hope that the legacy income will start to flow through later in the year. But again, obviously predicting how and when that will come through is so difficult because the flows have been so irregular in recent years. And similarly, there's one in probate at the moment which is potentially worth several million to us, and our legacy income last year is 3.7 million, so it could cover a large part of that, just a single one. We know that's in probate at the moment. We don't know how quickly it comes out. So our trustee strategic decisions are fundamentally based on potentially one or two transactions, certainly a flow of it. So the flow of the cash slowing down between the end of last year to where we're expecting it to be is meaning we've got to take different strategic decisions now. The timing of our capital projects will potentially be impacted on. And it's sort of under constant review. I think if the cash flows that come through as consistent as we'd hoped, we'd have greater certainty from what had already gone through probate. We'd have more cash in the bank to manage our day-to-day operations, and we'd be able to be much more decisive and clear in our decision-making to commit to key capital projects that are fundamental to every element of our strategic plan.
Someone else want to?
Yeah, incredibly similar. I mean, we've just been through our budget. We're going through our budgeting process at the moment for next year. And we do not put the probate backlog into that forecast, because we can't, because we don't know when it's likely to happen, because we cannot commit to spend that money unless we know it's going to come. So we have gone through budgeting rounds where we have taken money out from capital investments. We've had research this year that we've not invested. There's 44 projects we could have invested in this year that we've not invested in. And so we are making day-to-day decisions based on the fact that we don't know when this money is coming. What the size of it is. Our 30 million is our estimate. In our books to say that we know that's coming.
What stage was the decision made to take the potential probate funding out of your...
We have our normal probate funding, and this is the backlog. So,
right,
we've got
we've
got our 40% of forecast in there, so we plan for that. But because of this backlog that we estimate, it is an estimate. We can't put that into our plans.
And are there any consequences also for things like staff or training, those types of important aspects of making the charity move forward?
All of our budgetary decisions are made because we just put it in as our income stream. So we're making all of that on the basis that, and ostensibly it's 30 million, it's a backlog, it's money we should have already had in our organisation if there hadn't have been a backlog, assuming that 30 million is correct.
Yeah. Are you also monitoring the impact on the users of your service? Because ultimately that's what we're all here for.
Yeah.
And what's
that's the research where we've chosen. We've had to not do certain parts of research, and I mean we're in a scenario where we've launched our manifesto, and there's like £1 billion gap in cancer funding in the UK over the next 10 years, and we're sitting there going, we'd like to be able to do more of that, and the people in the will, that's what they want us to do, and we can't do that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, did you want to add something?
A bit of wider context that might be helpful. So a survey by Charities Aid Foundation last year found that around 55% of charities said they weren't confident that they would be able to fund their core costs based on their current projections, and around 46% saying they're needing to dip into their reserves just to carry on their current work, which will obviously have frontline impacts on those organisations, but is also not sustainable. So you've got the planning, but it is having an actual impact. So we went out to our members and we asked them for some real examples. We heard from a military charity who provides support for veterans, saying they can pretty reliably understand what the demand on their service is. They don't want to start support and treatment and not be able to complete it, but they've not been able to do that because they just can't reliably understand what that flow of income is going to look like over the next year. There is the wider context that there's the perfect storm of inflationary pressure, which all charities and the wider public are experiencing. That's also having not only a knock-on effect on charities' costs, but also the general public's ability to donate. So we've got this perfect storm where many charities are feeling their demand for their services increasing, their ability to raise money from the public is reducing, and this is yet another challenge for them. And this could also be part of the solution, because we believe there's a significant amount of funding that is potentially tied up, which could help see these charities through some really difficult times. So it's a real double whammy and really crucial to understand the impact it's having.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a little bit further about some of the points that you made in terms of those longer term decisions that you make. The evidence you've supplied to us suggests that your probate income tends to be used in a strategic sense for their longer term decisions. You mentioned the 5-year research, you mentioned the capital grants. Could you just elaborate that on the types of project that you tend to fund with probate money specifically that are being held back at the moment?
So probate is just one of our income streams. So we pool all of our income. We manage a reserves pot to keep the flow going. So we run as it that way. So it's not that we specifically put probate to a certain part. We are a massive funder of research, and in that we make those commitments for 5 and 7 years. We have 4 institutes that we fund joint fund across the UK. The Crick is one of them in London. We've got Cambridge, Manchester and Scottish institutes that take many millions, tens of millions of money from us every year. We have to have that money known, that we're getting that money in so we can get that money out.
So I made an assumption in the question, and feel free to say that I'm wrong. So you don't see the probate as particularly normally more stable or reliable for long-term decisions than other forms of your funding? It
is absolutely, I would say, it is an element that enables us to run our reserves level at whatever it is, because it has a level of consistency. It might be fluctuate, but it has a level of consistency, I agree. So it's a very stable income line for us.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's similar for us. So although it will, in normal times, there will be a certain degree of fluctuation, you can still have a degree of assurance over a 3, 4, 5 year period, which would be more accurate than a single year period. So certainly for capital projects, it's always been very key for us. Historically, in probably simpler times, it was very much always viewed like, well, legacy income would be our capital fund, and we build on that. It is covering more of our operational costs now. But I think a great example is probably, we fly 2 aircraft. At the moment, we've got 2 different types of aircraft. Now, historically, we'd aim to replace each aircraft after 10 years. It's the most efficient way to do it, because obviously it gets older. Replacement maintenance cards, it's more time down, which means you're not seeing patients if the aircraft's down and things like that. But it's having to delay those types of decisions, particularly at the moment with 2 aircraft types, means you have to keep your pilots able to fly both, have the required training, etc. So that becomes quite inefficient. And again, that's tying up your pilots more, making it more likely the aircraft won't be available and will be offline. So being able to use those funds, have them available, and the knowledge and foresight and comfort that cash is coming to be able to invest in a new aircraft would make a big difference to operation. And obviously having 2 aircraft as well, the larger type gives more access to patients as well. So it's just an example that being able to free up the cash for those kind of capital projects gives an immediate service to the quality of service we can give to the patient in flight. The hours we're able to operate our service, we've got critical care cars to cover when the aircraft aren't in flight. But obviously, ideally, we want the aircraft available at all times to give the best service to patients.
Okay, Mr. McDowell, I think you wanted to add.
Not on this particular issue. I think my colleagues are better placed. Thank you.
So I understand that since late 2023, September 2023, the grant rate is greater than the application rate. So, the backlog is beginning to decrease. Would you say you've noticed that improvement, and do you have confidence that it's a steady trajectory that's going to remain? And if you don't, what do you need to see to give you that confidence? So first of all, have you noticed an improvement?
Yes, I would say generally. Obviously, for ourselves, we have 200 members, so they won't all feel it equally. But we have noticed anecdotally that there's certainly been an uptick, which is really, really pleasing. What we need and what we would like to see going forward is 2 things in this respect. One, for that consistency to be there. The good news for us all, for all society and all of our charities is more of the public are choosing to include a gift in their will, which is brilliant news. But if you look at their sort of demographic projections, that also means there'll be more demands on this service, because there'll also be higher mortality in the near future. So what we can't have is a short-term fix of a service, but then we find in 6 months, in a year, 2 years' time, it's dipped back down below, particularly to deal with rising demand. So that's really important. But we'd also like to be able to have more certainty about what's in, because what HMCTS have been very good and increasingly good at sharing information with us as a consortia, but we are bound by confidentiality with some of the information, some of the management information, so rightly we don't share that. So therefore there's a wider group of people who are still making decisions which they're not able to make fully informed decisions on, so we'd like greater transparency for that information to be made more public sooner. And part of that might be having indicators at the point where the person applying for probate, whether it's professional or lay, to actually indicate if a charity is included. That would help us understand the size of charities within that within the backlog. It would also help see if there's any trends going forward, so we can workforce plan and understand our income projections. But also it would help understand if there's any differences in the way charity cases, do they take longer? It may be correlation rather than causal, but it might help understand if there's specialist training we can provide about dealing with bereaved people, dealing with charitable estates, because they can sometimes be slightly different or with more nuance in the estate. So having an indicator earlier on would help us understand the size of the backlog, help actually with the flow for the end user as well, help us reach out to bereaved families potentially as well. So the whole system could be improved, and it would also start dialogue where we could work even closer with HMCTS as a whole sector for the greater good. So that would be really helpful. But the main point is about consistency going forward.
Okay. Before I ask the others to comment, I think you touched on it. The reason why it might be self-evident if there's been an improvement that you're experiencing it, but the reason why I'm asking is there's a suggestion that the legacy estates, the ones that you tend to benefit, are perhaps the larger estates with more complexity. So it might be that there's been an overall improvement, but actually that's the low-hanging fruit of the simple estates, and you're not really seeing an improvement for those larger estates which you tend to benefit. That's why I'm asking if you felt that improvement. I don't know if you wanted to comment.
Yep, so I absolutely can comment. I think we benefit from the lower ones as well, so we just don't get as much of an uptick difference. So we always know that our Q4, which is January, February, March, we get more legacies. So the service tends to work, that they tend to do more complex. So we always uptick our forecast in our budgets for the Q4. In January, we didn't get anything pre-Christmas time, really, but in January we overperformed that performance by 20%, and in February we overperformed that by 40%. So, but what we don't know is how much of that is backlog, and how much of that is just us not getting our forecast right of the normal flow. So yes, there's been an uptick more than we expected, but we have no visibility of whether that's backlog or not. And I think, as Alex said, I think our big thing is forecast and getting that visibility of where the cases are, whether they're stopped. Are they paper and complex? Because they're more likely, as Alex said, if they've got an indicator in there, we may or may not. And if we do, then we'll get a larger proportion. If we don't get anything, so it's very lumpy. But having that visibility of what those cases are, and the simple ones, and they will just come through, and we know they'll come through. So that future visibility is so important for us to be able to be better at being able to put future money in our forecast.
So obviously it's a smaller charity. It's always hard to follow the trends. It might just be a little bit of the effect of timing. But we saw up to September last year we were about 1.7 million behind our budget, and in the last 3 months that had gone down to 1 million behind budget. So not only was it the first quarter we hit our expectations, but it also covered net. So that does suggest to me that's not just the low-paying fruit there, because that's the quite valuable little larger estates coming through to us. And we've kind of seen a similar trend in the first couple of months of the year. So I think that is reassuring to see where that is. I guess reassuring to see that it's been a couple of months in performance, not just 1 month and then dip down. So that is positive to see. I guess it's still probably my personal expectations will probably still take towards the end of the year to sort of clear that backlog down to a sort of historic level. I guess the areas to sort of consider is will it be able to maintain that level? Ideally drive down as well, because obviously it's been digitalised, the system, so you'd hope it would speed up and be better. That continual improvement, particularly if death rates are to rise as is expected, so there will be an increased pressure over the next couple of years. So it's making sure the system's in place to do that, which is hard to get assurance with at the moment, because obviously we're not there yet. But
the sustainability point we would not see. And I would say that Q1 and Q2 were well below us on forecast. So our forecasts in Q1 and Q2 were well below where we expected them to be. So yes, we've had a bump for Q4, but at the start of the year we were very not where we expected to be. So it's been a very feast and famine year.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bunn. Ms. Hopkins.
Thank you. Just pushing a bit on that future-proofing point that was raised earlier, and I noticed in the joint submission between Remember Will and the Institute of Legacy Management, there were concerns about future capacity of the probate registry in that context of an ageing population and therefore more deaths each year going forward. So how, all of you really, how confident are you that probate will be able to cope with that future demand?
I don't think it would be fair to rank a confidence level, but if we look at over the last year, what we've seen is the raw output actually from HMCTS has been pretty consistent with years gone by. What has changed is the number of applications being made, and if that's an indicator of likely future demand, and we think it is, the evidence would suggest they haven't been coping as well as they could have done up to this point, albeit absolutely noting the recent performance improvement. So I wouldn't say I've got confidence or not, but what we need to see is reasons to believe that the planning is being put in place, whether it's workforce, systems, ways of make it work. But the other important element here is not just ability to deal with the capacity, but also make sure that the service is dealing with the quality and safeguarding elements that it always has. I mean, we're big supporters of what the service does. It prevents fraud. It helps loved ones at a difficult time get the assurance they need to live their lives at a very traumatic time. So yes, we want to see capacity increase, but not at the cost of quality or some of the safeguards that are absolutely essential for us.
And I think I absolutely agree with all of that. But I think, and the one thing I think I'd add is, it will require, I'm sure, further transformation, because these things don't just organically grow. And I think the thing that we'd like to say is, trust us by giving us insight to that, because then we can plan accordingly. The issue at the moment is when we don't have the insight, then it's really difficult to plan. So if they decide for right reasons that they need to train a load more people, so they take some experienced caseworkers off to train them, therefore the output is going to drop for 2 or 3 months, then that's fine, just tell us. And then we know. But when we're left in the dark, it's really hard, because suddenly we just don't get anything. So we want to be part of the journey, because we really do appreciate the work that they do, and we recognise they need to transform. But we want to be part of that, so we can plan accordingly.
I'll just ask, have you really had any conversations or discussions with HMCTS about sort of this future-proofing and stability?
So we work all through the ILM and the Remember a Charity in terms of direct relationship with HMCTS. We did approach them directly in January. We are still trying to arrange that meeting, but most of our work, we align absolutely with We're One Voice from a charity perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Cancer Research UK submitted in the written evidence the consultations on will storage and electronic wills. Do you have any concerns about how the probate service might approach that future opportunity, or is it a challenge? You know,
I'm not sure it's one that we as long as the will is secure, I think we would go more to the practitioners for that and see that's where we see that.
Right. Okay. Thanks. The point you raised earlier about checks and balances around fraud, ILM submitted the separate evidence about having rigorous checks as part of the process for applying for probate. Is there anything else you'd like to add to those points raised earlier?
I don't know if it's additional points, but what we have, when a grant of probate is complete, obviously the will becomes public, and the Smear and Forward service, which has been providing valuable service for charities for many years, ensure charities are aware of their legal entitlement. That service no longer happens in Scotland for reasons that probably not helpful to get into here, but what we've seen is a drop-off in Scotland in terms of charitable gifts compared to the rest of the UK, when historically their trend followed exactly the same way. Without being able to prove that would suggest that loss of that service, that loss of that transparency, that loss of that check and balance is detrimentally affecting behaviour, and because of a lack of visibility both for charities and the visibility of will, that would suggest that there is a fraud risk that we need to take very seriously.
Anyone else like to add to that?
Just really to emphasise, I mean, anecdotally, you do hear so much of that, and it's like I say, it's difficult to put that sort of figure on what the impact is, but it's looking at the Scotland figures, it's quite notable difference, and it does certainly tie in with the anecdotal sort of stories you hear in the sector. So the importance of it as a control is absolutely fundamental. Yeah.
And we support that.
Thank you. Just the final point. The threshold for whether an estate has to apply for probate hasn't changed since 1999. The Institute of Legacy Management stated you'd strenuously resist any increase in the threshold. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on your specific concerns?
I think it just builds on the previous point, which is what this is, it's not just a way of expediting the money, it's a transparency and visibility, and therefore anything which safeguards testators' good intentions and it gives a charity that visibility is a good thing. So the concern would be how much more of an opportunity might it be, and sometimes it might just be lack of understanding on a part of a lay executor about what their roles and expectations are, and there might be different intent here, but the point is if you change the thresholds, we just need to be very mindful of what the unintended consequences might be for making sure that the intended money goes to the intended parties.
And with the digitisation of the service, one would assume that those ones would be the more simple cases, so should just flow anyway. So why would you look to change the threshold in that scenario?
Yeah, I think it comes back to, at the end of the day, the main focus for all of us is making sure that the person's final wishes are honoured, and it's effectively the only real control in the process. To raise the threshold just increases the risk significantly for a large number of people.
Thank you. Thanks.
On the other hand, of course, the threshold of £5,000 in 1999 on today's money will be just over 9,000. Mm-hmm. Isn't there a logic to increase to uplift it to take account of the rate of inflation since that time?
We'd certainly not push back against a logical increase on an inflation basis, but the point is still, whichever way you do it, whatever the threshold is the system secure, and is it making sure that people's wishes are being honoured? So yes, there's an inevitable kind of fiscal drag of what those are worth, but actually it needs to be understood in the context of safeguarding intent as well.
The idea is that it's the smaller estates, isn't it, basically, than the simpler ones that needn't necessarily attract a fee. That's the point. Otherwise, you're having to pay out a fee.
Absolutely.
Which has gone up rather more than the threshold has.
Yeah, well, I think there'd be a rationale for an inflation-based increase. It's if the change was to reduce workload, something like that, then that would obviously be a concern.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Mr. Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. One part of applying for probate involves sending the original will to HMCTS. That is then scanned and is sent for storage. What concerns, if any, would you have if solicitors or notaries were able to scan wills themselves and certify the electronic copy was correct?
I think probably we'd have a similar view to the previous conversation, which would be if this is a way of making the system and service more efficient, then that would be something sensible to look at. We wouldn't have a significant problem with it, again, making sure the appropriate checks and balances were still in place.
Okay, because that would then remove unnecessary cost and duplication that actually happens. And make the process a bit easier. Yeah. So, because a number of them must be lost in the post if they're not sent by secure delivery by Royal Mail.
And I think this is probably one more to be completely unfair for practitioners to answer than ourselves from our perspective.
Angela, as a non-exec director at the Land Registry, are there lessons to be learned from the Land Registry portal and the digital registration service?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm in a position to answer that today, but and I'm sure if you wanted us to link up with the Land Registry team, I'm sure we could, but that is a very similar process, you're right, and the legal certification of that thing is for debate there too.
How would you describe your relationship with HMCTS?
Which is...
I think that's to everybody, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we do ours through the ILM and RAC, so Remember Charity, so we do not have a direct relationship with HMCTS.
So we do, and we'd say it's very constructive. Yeah. I think it's fair to say it's improved over time. I think 4 or 5 years ago, I don't think there was quite the level of collective understanding of the impact of decisions being made HMCTS has on charities. I think that is very different now. I think they've been much more open to working collaboratively and proactively reaching out to us. But those points that we're asking for still remain about even greater transparency, being able to share the information sooner, and some of the service practice change that might help us. They still stand. But in terms of the overall relationship, we've been, we felt listened to and supported, and they've been very constructive over the last few months.
You made a number of suggestions in terms of how charities could be assisted. For example, has there been any progress in adding a flag to indicate whether an estate includes a charitable gift?
You'd probably have to direct that to the colleagues within the service. So they've agreed in principle. I think a lot of it would depend on other changes they make at the time, but they've agreed, but we've not yet seen the impact of it having been delivered.
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah, no, that's right, yeah, I believe. Yeah.
And I think as a large charity with a clear dependency on the income, I think we would like to feel that we could be trusted to get the information that the ILM get. I think the fact that information is shared with the ILM but they're not allowed to pass it on to us feels somewhat harsh.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, understood. Dr. Mullins, what do you want to address?
I think we've kind of slightly covered it. I think it's more just listening to your evidence. I think to my mind, it's important for us to go back to HMCTS to make sure that they are thinking about all these modelling and projection type challenges, because you can just imagine that there's a department that's used to things going a certain way and hasn't really thought through that we're entering a period of uncertainty, and particularly in relation to if more and more people are leaving a bequest. That's just more and more work for them, and have they really engaged with that? I think that's for us as a committee to make sure we do that.
If there's any observations on that point. Okay. Thanks. I just wanted to be talking about data and so on. What data currently do you get from HMCTS?
Everyone gets the publicly available ONS data, but that's a bit of a blunt tool. It tells us how many applications have been made and how many grants have been given. What we don't get is the nature of those, how big the current backlog is. I should caveat that by saying HMCTS have been sharing information with Remember Charity and ILM, but on the very strict instructions that it shouldn't be shared wider, just to help us understand what's going on. So we were able to communicate to our members trends, and we could say, look, things look like they're improving, but we've not been able to share that information more widely.
Why is that? What is it that they're sharing with you, and why are you not allowed to share it more widely?
You probably have to ask them about why we're not able to share it. But it's just, and even within that, there's other information which would probably be more helpful. So we do get a bit more of a breakdown in terms of total number of cases processed, the breakdown between digital and paper, so all useful information, but it doesn't necessarily tell us how many were charitable, because we haven't got an indicator. It doesn't tell us why cases were stopped, for example, what proportion of stopped cases were charity cases. So again, we're able to extrapolate from that based on historic trends. We're able to see the overall shape of it. So it's not that it's ungratefully received or it doesn't have any value to us, but it doesn't give us the granularity to make any certain conclusions either. So it's a bit of a help, but we would like a little bit of more of a help, and sooner, because if we have to rely on both the ONS data, which always has a 3-month lag on it, and then the charities have to work out how long it's going to be for that money to translate. There's a real lag indicator, a real lag in terms of any sense. So even when things have been improving, it's actually, we saw the data suggesting from September onwards it was improving, but charities haven't felt it actually probably till January, February. So we've been saying, look, hold on, it's coming, but it would be good to be able to share that for that planning purpose.
Is the reason why do they say that it's kind of provisional data then, and so is that their kind of reasoning? It's provisional data, it may not prove to be correct, and therefore we don't want it distributed more widely?
Absolutely, it is provisional data. Yeah,
I get that. And you've indicated some of the data you'd like to have. Is there anything else by way of additional data you think that could be provided that would assist you? Any of you?
I think as long as we've got the breakdown of the future and we know the ones that are stopped and where the stopped ones is clearly something that's important for us as well. So,
I mean, when you've had discussions with HMCTS, as you do, how receptive have they been towards requests for more data?
Yeah, I think they've been receptive and they've understood why we've wanted it. What we'd like to see is now them following up and starting to provide it. They haven't, unless there's been a very good reason why they couldn't, they haven't pushed back. But, the commitment and then the delivery there's a bit of a lag at the moment.
Okay. All right. Okay. And you've spelled out the reasons why it helps you with planning and so on to have more data. I think that's well understood. If I can just deal with cancer research, in the written evidence, you say like more opportunities to provide feedback receive updates and input on possible developments. Is there anything specific you could help us with? What you're thinking of by that, Angela?
This is what I talked about, where we know that they might be doing some changes, like back in the, I think it was back in the spring, where they moved a lot of caseworkers into training and stopped producing. I mean, we got to hear about that almost in hindsight rather than in future planning. So that's why we didn't get any Q1 output in terms of probate. But it would have been nice to have known that, because they would have planned it a couple of months in advance, yeah? And if they'd have shared that with us and had that correspondence with us, we would therefore not have put anything in our budget to come through in those couple of months. So it's that sort of conversation and visibility that means that we can work our plans in line with their plans and then get more stability, because we recognise that it's not going to be smooth.
Okay. Any other observations from your colleagues on the panel?
I think
that covers it. Okay. I mean, one of the consequences of moving more people into training, we've picked up, is that they're not answering the telephone helplines in the mornings. What impact, if anything, does that have on your operations as charities? Does it make it harder for you, or it doesn't have any impact on you?
Probably not much impact.
Not
I mean, as long as the output and the public service is maintained, then that's our concern.
Okay.
I think directly not an impact on the executors who obviously want to update us and speak to us.
It's more an issue for the
like
executors themselves,
yeah.
isn't it, and then the practitioners.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a lot of talk about Scotland. Obviously, Scotland has a separate legal system, and always has had a separate legal system for those who are following this. So I've got a number of questions. I know some of you have touched on the Scottish system vis-a-vis the system in England and Wales. So Scotland's not gone through the major reorganisation of the type that we've seen at the probate register. So probably Angela and Alec probably best for this. Could the UK-wide organisations, what are your experiences firstly on the relative delays in Scotland versus delays in England and Wales? Let me start with yourself, Alec.
Yeah, so the first thing to say is the Scottish market is smaller, so statistical data is by definition a smaller sample size. But as I go back to my point earlier, I think it was 2018, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but the notification service changed because the fees that were being charged at the time meant it was unsustainable for Sum.INFO to provide that service to charities. And what that has meant is there's been obviously legacy gifts have still been received and people have still included charities in their wills, but Scotland has now become an outlier in terms of the overall trend of growth across compared to the rest of the UK when it was tracking the same, which while again it doesn't we can't prove a negative, but it does suggest that there's something to look at there, the impact of that loss of that service, which is why we hold so dearly to the probate service we have in the rest of the UK as that fraud prevention, but also that ability to understand the data early on. It all comes back to that same point. With greater transparency, we can all not only plan, but we can also help make sure those safeguards are in, which are beneficial to individual executors, to bereaved families and charities and their beneficiaries. So yeah, there has been a change in the trend in Scotland since 2018, which is definitely worth trying to understand. We have a hypothesis, but trying to understand what is going on there.
So we rely on executors to tell us when we have something in the will. So there's no visibility of a pipeline or anything. So we've lost all of that visibility. We believe, likewise, that we have lost income. But again, it's very difficult to track or understand that.
Well, so that was a change in 2020. So what could be done then? Because I'm looking at the results of a study from my probate partner in February, which says only 21% of the Scottish public understands what probate is and what the process entails. 65% would confirm they would consult a solicitor, and 11% advised they would look for support online. So while the Scottish system may be better and money being handed quicker, what steps could the government, whether in Scotland or here in the legal sector, do to better advertise those different systems and save bereaved relatives solicitors' fees and their time? Is there any suggestions you've got there, Alec? I know you're thinking through that question.
Yeah.
I've seen you thinking your answer through it. You're very much like me as and how I
like a practitioner's question.
Yeah, I frankly it wasn't what I prepared for. I think it always goes back to just the information available. Whether charities can potentially play a role, but we are, while increasingly a recipient of gifts within the wills, the overwhelming majority of probate cases may not include a charity. So I think this is a wider issue than a charity issue. What we need to make sure is where we are involved, we can help guide people who might contact us, might not know, make sure there is good guides available through organisations like the Institute of Legacy Management, who do provide information and signposting to what you might need to do as an executor, as a lay executor, signposting you to where you might need professional help. So that help is out there, and it might be just a case of making sure people are effectively signposted to the information they need. Yeah. I don't know to the extent that does or doesn't happen currently, but I don't necessarily see this explicitly as a charity issue, obviously, but as charities as a proportion of all estates, it will.
Obviously, charities are impacted by it, Alec, which is the point I'm trying to make, Angela.
I think it's very, we work within the system, which means I think it's very hard for people without the probate registry service to be able to know what to do. So I'm afraid I'm an advocate for a service for people to do that. Yeah. However skeleton that might not be, it might not be quite as big as the UK one, but the central group seems to be.
Final question, Chair, is do the charities have any concerns about the fact the CMA are investigating some of this, particularly the unregulated online providers, and basically important documents going missing, and effectively charities could lose out as a result of that. Do you have any concerns around that, Alec?
Of course we have concerns. It goes back to the heart of why we're so passionate about the probate service in general and good practice within all will drafting. It's slightly beyond our brief in terms of, this is an issue for practitioners, because this is actually about the integrity of wills in general rather than gifts in wills. But to your previous point, it will affect us if wills are not effectively managed, documents go missing, we will potentially be, and more importantly, the causes we serve affected. So we have a view on it, but it's probably more of a question for practitioners. I'm not a legal practitioner, and the remedy isn't one that's within our gift.
Agree with that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Mr. Daly.
I'm making a lot of apologies today because I've been up and down out here, and I'm apologising to everyone. So I'm going to again say I apologise. So I'll just give a universal apology as I'm here. I think when if I was in your positions as with your esteemed charities, I certainly would want to keep as cordial a relationship with the probate registry as possible, and therefore I'm not surprised that you're speaking in somewhat glowing terms regarding the positive relationship you have with them. But we have identified, certainly I think that there is evidence to say that from the pandemic onwards and how the services come out of the pandemic, that applications and processing has not been at the speed which it was previously, if I can put it that way, without sounding too inarticulate. Is that a correct impression? That there is, whatever the reason is, there is something that has led to further delays in the system, which, as I'm sure you've told my colleagues, is meaning that money's coming to a charity like yourselves is not where it was. So is that correct, just in very basic terms?
Yeah.
I just wondered, in the sense of, as organisations, if that was of concern to you, how would you feed those concerns into the probate registry? I understand you may have people working for you on individual bequests, or and somebody may phone up in respect to an individual case. But if it is, from a corporate response to this, if it is causing problems, have you done anything, or has it been have you spoken to anybody in terms of this?
We work predominantly through the ILM and the RAC, so the Institute of Legacy Management and the member charity. So they are the voice of the charity within HCMCTS. But we did take to the point where we wrote directly to Nick Godwin, just in the back end of last year, to ask for a direct relationship, a direct conversation with our CEO.
Okay. And the reason for that is obviously that you were so concerned regarding delays that you felt that you had to somewhat. And
we did it in support of ILM because we just said that we just need to have that.
And just so we understand how responsive all the probate registry are when there's very proper concerns raised at a higher level, how would you categorise their response to the concerns that were raised with them?
I'll let you talk on them, Jim.
Yeah, so I mean, this goes back pre-pandemic as well, when decisions have been made that have had an indirect impact on the charity sector. So they have been responsive. We first started speaking to them to raise our concerns in 2019, and they convened the probate user group, which we are part of, and on a quarterly basis we have an opportunity to ask questions about what's happening and try and understand what changes are being made, but also to highlight the impact it's having on charities. So we have a forum for raising those concerns, and we don't hold back in sharing those concerns. So while you're right to say it's in our interest to have a cordial relationship, it's not in our interest to have a relationship where we don't speak the truth to them about the impact it's having. So we have done that, and we feel they've responded accordingly, but we it hadn't happened as quickly as we would have liked to happen as well.
Okay, and just touching on the different, whether it's corporately or individually, different people have different relationships with the probate registry. Now, I'm assuming, I'm sorry if you've answered this question already, that the charity is very rarely an executor, or an individual from the charity, should I say, is very rarely an executor. So in terms of how you are somewhat reliant on a third-party individual, I'm assuming whoever that third-party individual will be, who is either maybe a legal representative, whoever it may be, who is looking after the estate of whoever the person is who's left some money. Is that correct? Have I understood that correctly? And so how does that relationship what's the triangulation between that relationship and the concerns that you've highlighted here today?
I think that relationship is fine once you've built the bridge. And it's getting to the point of building the bridge of getting that.
But from a charity's perspective, are you, through legal because of the legality of the situation, are you dependent on that third party to be your in point if you need information regarding a bequest? I don't think either of the three of you could just phone up and say, give us some information. Perhaps you could. Are you reliant on that third party to be the...
We are, and the relationship will differ, or I should say our approach would differ if it's a professional versus a lay executor. Obviously, if it's a family member who's never done this before, they're recently bereaved, we might have a different tone in our conversations, where we also know a professional executor understands what they should be doing on our behalf, because that's who they're working on behalf of. They work on behalf of the testator and the beneficiaries. So we will have conversations, and that's the other part of the importance of the probate service, because once we know who the extracting executors are, we can make the appropriate contact with them. So if it's a lay executor, we can signpost them to where help is available, or the ILM website, make sure they're aware of their legal obligations, and we can offer support in an appropriate, sensitive way. If it's a professional executive, we can say, this is what we expect, this is what we need, this is what we can do to help you. So that triangulation does very much happen, but it all does depend on that visibility of that will, which is why it's so crucial.
Ask two very brief questions. Because I'm assuming, I'm quite interested in the sense of how you find out about the bequest. I'm assuming is it the legal representative, is it the individual, or do you have some other way of finding out that the money's been left to you as a charity?
It's a bit of all of those. So sometimes the first time we hear is the executive themselves will contact us and say, my loved one's sadly died, and I noticed you're in their will. Sometimes the solicitor will contact us, but there is a service provided by a company called Smith & Ford, who, because the will is a publicly available document, they will scan those wills and notify charities if they're included, so that we can make sure for that fraud prevention, and we can also make sure that we're not contacting potentially deceased supporters, we're not causing further concern to people.
Because I assume, and I'm taking that you are the height of professionalism at the top of what you do, but I've certainly heard that there have been some concerns regarding the conduct, shall we say, of certain organisations within the charitable sector, in terms of having been very, if you need the money, you need the money. Do you know what I mean? And you want to get that in the most efficient way possible. But do you think this committee should at all be concerned by the relationship between some people in the charitable sector who are not as professional perhaps as your organisations, and executors and other beneficiaries? Or is that not something we should consider?
You should consider whether you feel it's appropriate to consider.
Is it an issue that you're aware of?
we feel that working through organisations like ILM and having a very clear code of conduct and actually working proactively with solicitors is the best way to make sure that the highest standard is always met. So we don't think there's a particularly big issue. Will there be individual instances when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of wills every year? This is human nature, but I think I would be very satisfied that the overwhelming majority of charities work to very high standards.
And after all the questions and all the evidence we've heard here today, what are you recommending that we do? What should we put in our report? Not everything, but just give us one thing, just as a takeaway, as something you think we should put in as a recommendation that perhaps the MOJ or the probate registry can act upon, and it could be a positive outcome.
Transparency of where they are, where they're going, and how that will help us to be able to take what are people's wishes and to put those wishes as soon as possible to the services that they want those services being, whether that's research, whether that's ambulances, air ambulance, or what it is. We are at the moment not able to do that as effectively as we should be able to do it, and we could do that better with more transparency.
David, do you have any on that?
We'll try that in a timely fashion as well. So quick, full, efficient, transparent information, clarity, and discussion. And discussion, be it with us as a sector and with charities, and responding to executors as well, because that doesn't directly impact us. Aware of when we do speak to executors, there can be challenges for them getting information back and things like that. So that transparency stretching right across relationships.
Right.
Yeah, and as a build on that, look, we all want the same thing, which is an efficient, well-run service that benefits executors, charities and beneficiaries. So yes to transparency, but also working with us in partnership when there are changes, if there are changes in information, management information, but also changes in practices, because we can work partnerial to find better solutions that work upstream. We are invested stakeholders in this, so to work with us whenever there are changes afoot, to understand what the implications might be on the charity sector, that is so invaluable to us.
This is one question. I'm sorry. So are you saying to us that you want to change the nature of the... I asked you questions earlier on quite right about the legal responsibility. If you're not executors of a will, then the probate registry will speak generally to to either the appointed legal representatives, the individual who is the executor. Are you saying that we should look at other options whereby you have, as charities and beneficiaries, more of the opportunity to have a direct conversation with the probate registry? Or is the existing relationship I've just described there satisfactory?
It's certainly improving, but if there are significant changes planned, to be involved in or informed or in some form being able to shape it would be really, really helpful, because whatever happens, there will be an implication for us as end users and therefore for our beneficiaries. So to be seen as a partner in those decisions will be really invaluable.
But it's more at a service level than a case level.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the service level, not the case level. So we don't need to be involved anymore at the case level. We get that at the end, but it's the service level and how the service is performing is the bit that we'd like greater involvement in.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. We've talked a lot about process, quite rightly, trying to improve efficiency, transparency, timeliness, all those important aspects of a good functioning system. But just to try and humanise this for a moment, one of the things that you're doing with these legacies is using what family's loved one has left behind for something often they're very passionate, that perhaps happened in their own lives. And that family will want to make sure that that legacy does what their loved one wanted it to do, and more with any luck. So with these delays, do you ever get inquiries from families asking what's happened to the legacy? Have you seen an uplift in that, or do you have a way of communicating to them, or would it be helpful to be able to communicate to them more regularly through the process what's actually happening, so they feel confident that the legacy that has been handed down is able to do what was envisaged?
For generally smaller charities, not really. So obviously during the phase it goes through, the contact will be the executor. Once that's settled, we've received the funds. As a regional charity, we don't get many sort of restricted funds where it's specifically for something, so it's generally for the service. That's probably slightly different for example, a large charity like RNLI. You might have a legacy for a specific place. And that might be slightly different, but for small regional charities, there's not so much. We always extend an invite and a thank you for that legacy to the family, because obviously we're often not aware of the legacy till after, so we can't thank before. So that there can be some relationships maintained from that, but it doesn't tend to be around the specific what's happened to their gift. It'll be a more general query about what's your organisation doing.
We're not hugely different now.
And just finally, if I may, Chair, in terms of improving the working relationship between charitable sector, HMCTS, probate registry, you've mentioned this probate user group, which sounds like a constructive sort of way forward, at least a forum in which some of these discussions and exchanges of experiences can take place. But trying to sort of think beyond that and ways that you can ensure that those working in HMCTS and probate registry understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of a charity who are on the receiving end of that service. Has anyone from HMCTS or probate registry, or would it be helpful for them to do so, to come and perhaps spend a day with your team just to see how you access the service, what are the things that are getting in your way, the information flow, the data have been helpful? Is that something that you think would, A, has it ever happened, and B, if it hasn't, would that be something that would be useful for us perhaps to recommend?
One of the recent developments out of the probate user group is something akin to what you described, not exactly that, so yes, it would be helpful. We are bringing the charity to the service rather than the other way around, but we're going to be going in and offering helping colleagues at HMCTS understand that yes, while you're just processing a volume, there are human impacts at the end of this. There are charities putting that money to good use. This is the impact it has on us in terms of our ability to expedite it as effectively as possible, and actually what the impact of that work does, because we want HMCTS colleagues to understand that they are doing a really, really important service to the charities as well. We want to help their morale, but also it helps them understand both humanising it, but also the impact of their delays or challenges on ourselves. So not exactly as you described, but I think it's an incredibly good idea, and we've started to put those kind of things into place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unless there's anything else that you wanted to raise with us, No. Well, it's been extremely helpful from our point of view, so thank you very much for taking the time to come and give evidence to us today. It's much appreciated. And the session is concluded. Order, order.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.